Welcome to Jammin' with Jason Mefford, a show where we discuss topics relevant to chief audit executives and professionals in audit, risk, and compliance. We discuss the technical and soft skills needed to navigate the minefields of organizations. You hear best practices and practical advice for helping you advance your career, and we'll even talk about music, mindfulness, and psychology, because we can. So sit back and relax while you listen to the #1 podcast in the world for internal auditors, unscripted and unedited. Welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Hey, everybody. I don't know if you're like me, but it's the end of 2019. Can you believe that we are already at the end of 2019? Wow. I don't know where the time's going the older that I get. But this New Year's Eve, New Year's Day transition is not only transitioning from 2019 to 2020, but it's the change of a decade. And I know for me, as I've been thinking about this for the last week or so, I grew up, I love history. I read a lot of things about history, and I've always referred to the 20s, meaning the 1920s, and the things that happened in the 20s, meaning 1920s. And so for me, it's a little weird to realize that the 20s are now, and we're going to be starting to refer to the 20s as where we are currently at. So I know for me, it's a little bit crazy. I don't know if it's that way for you. Now, with the end of the year, I thought this week I would talk about New Year's resolutions. And here's the reason, right? Lots of people, almost everybody, makes some sort of New Year's resolution. But here's the deal. Probably 90 to 95% of people don't ever keep those New Year's resolutions. So they get all excited at the end of the year. They write down a few things that they want to try to accomplish this next year. They work really hard for a week or two, and then they stop. And they don't actually accomplish their New Year's resolutions. So again, probably 90 to 95% of people do not actually complete their New Year's resolutions. So I wanted to talk to you this week about that and actually give you some tips for how you can make 2020 different, okay? Because again, if you're like lots of people, you probably sat down and said, here's some of the things I want to do next year. I want to get in better health. I want to lose some weight. Maybe I want to quit smoking, or I want to quit drinking, or, I want to do something else. And I bring those up because those are some of the most common New Year's resolutions. But again, 90 to 95% of people don't actually follow through and complete their New Year's resolutions. So let's talk a little bit about why that happens. And I'm going to give you some tips that we're going to get into in more detail on how you can make 2020 different. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of run through some of the kind of what the tips are, and then let's dive in and talk about them in more detail. So the first one is, don't just set goals, create habits. And this is one of the issues, most people with a New Year's resolution, they create a goal, but they don't actually work on trying to change their habits. And we'll talk about how you can actually do that. The second one is, have some compassion for yourself if you didn't accomplish everything that you wanted to in 2019. The third one is about breaking down your goals into 90-day or quarterly goals that you can break down even further into some of the things that are daily and weekly things that you need to do. Because the fourth one is, you need to start creating some daily routines, or what I'll refer to sometimes as habits, and we're going to talk more about habits, so that you can reach those 90-day goals. And then finally is just a reminder that our habits, or those things that we do, our behaviors, that's actually who we are. And so when we work on developing our habits and kind of thinking about what kind of person do I need to be, what do I need to be doing so that then I can have that particular goal. So again, that's kind of the overview of the tips that I want to be talking through with you this week. So let's just dive into it and get right into it. So let's start with the first one. Don't just set goals, but create habits. And so here's the thing. You need to learn a little bit about habits and why it is so often that people are not able to keep or follow through on their goals or their New Year's resolutions. And so I'll use New Year's resolution and goals kind of interchangeably as we're talking today. So habits are things that you habitually do. You kind of get into a routine so that you're actually doing these things regularly. And if we want to accomplish certain things, what we have to do is change our habits to be able to help us in achieving those things. So let me share a little story with you. There's a great book, and I'll try to put it in the show notes here too, that if you're interested to go out and get and take a look at. But it's called The Power of Habit: Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. So again, that's The Power of Habit: Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. And it's a book by Charles Duhigg. Hopefully I'm getting that name right on the pronunciation. But in that book, Charles shares a story that I want to share with you because it's important if you are trying to develop new habits or trying to break old habits, that you understand how habits actually work. So remember some of the resolutions I talked about. If you want to quit smoking as an example, well, smoking usually becomes a habit. And if you want to quit smoking, you need to quit that particular habit. Okay. So there's a story that he shares in the book. And this was, the U.S. military over in the Middle East. And so they were having some issues where they were kind of having these mini riots. And so here's what would happen, right, is they'd get called in to kind of police the area after this riot had started. And so there were a whole bunch of people around and things were starting to get damaged and other stuff. You know how kind of riots work, right? And what they did was they went back and they started looking at what does it take for it to get to a riot state? And they started to notice some patterns, okay? So one of the patterns that they would notice is there would usually be a couple of people that would gather in kind of the town square or on a corner, and the two people would start arguing about something. And so they would start arguing with each other. And as they started arguing, you would start to have people that would stop and kind of watch what was going on. So when a few people stop to watch, now all of a sudden, everybody else is looking around and going, hey, what's going on over there? More people come over, more people stand around and are watching. Some of those people may start to argue with each other, and slowly this crowd starts to gather where originally there were just these two people that were arguing. And so what would happen is more and more people would end up showing up. And what would happen is food cart vendors would notice, hey, there's a whole bunch of people over in this area. Let's take our food carts over so we can sell some food. Very entrepreneurial spirit, and makes a lot of sense. If there's a lot of people, show up with your food carts, sell food. And so now, people are going to start to get hungry. They start eating, buying from the food vendors. More and more people show up. Now they're not hungry, so they don't need to go home, and they just continue to argue, and the crowd gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually it starts into a rioting kind of position. And so as they were looking at this and they started to see these patterns, they realized And this is kind of one of your lessons about habits is habits are based on patterns. And so if you can interrupt a pattern, then you never end up getting to that end result. Okay. So as an example, in this example, they realized that, you know what, if we just stop the food cart vendors from showing up, eventually people are going to get hungry, they're going to get tired, and they're going to go home or go to a restaurant to try to eat because they're going to get hungry. And so they realized that. And instead of trying to stop people from arguing in the street, they just did a pattern interrupt. So when the food cart vendors would start showing up, they'd kind of push them back, not let them into that particular area. And eventually what they noticed is, sure enough, people started to get hungry. They decided to go back home. The crowd dissipates and they didn't have a riot. So one of the things that you need to learn about is, if you're trying to break a habit, you want to do something to interrupt the normal pattern. So again, if you think about things that you may want to do differently in 2020, what little thing can you do to interrupt the pattern so that you don't end up getting to that particular place? Okay. So you can interrupt to try to stop bad habits, but on the flip side, if you're trying to develop a new habit, now you need to start deciding how you can create a pattern that will help you to develop that particular habit. So, as an example, one of the things that I do is I try to go on a walk every day, at least. And then some weeks I'm better than others. But one little thing that I have done to try to help create a pattern for me is I leave my shoes and socks that I need to be able to use to go out for my walk uh, in an area of the house where I see them. So I come out from my bedroom in the morning, I start making my coffee and my shoes are sitting right there staring at me. Now, the reason that I put them there is so, again, it reminds me every day when I come out, I see them, but also it makes it very easy for me to sit down and put on my shoes. If I get, into the kitchen area and realize, oh, I should go for my walk right now, but I have to walk all the way back into the bedroom to get my shoes and socks, excuse me, because of that delay, I may not take the action. And it's only 2 or 3 seconds, but if there's 2 or 3 seconds that gets in the way of kind of that thought that you're thinking and what you should do, and actually being able to do the thing, then you're less likely to do it. So that's why I leave my shoes and socks out. Probably drives my wife nuts, but I leave them out in a particular area every night before I go to bed. I leave them in the same place so that when I come out of my bedroom in the morning, I see them and I'm much more likely to sit down, put them on, and actually go for my walk. Now, I do the same thing with my guitar. I like to play the guitar. If my guitar is in the case in the back storage room, I'm probably not going to get it out and play it. But if it's sitting right in front of me, if it's sitting on the stand in my library, I'm much more likely to actually pick it up and play. Okay, so there's kind of your first tip. Don't just set a goal, but start thinking about how can you create habits to be able to help you accomplish those goals. And so again, that could either be creating a new goal if you're trying to do something new, or it could be trying to find a way to interrupt the pattern that you've developed in that habit that you're trying to break. Now, the second one, compassion for yourself if we didn't accomplish what we were hoping to last year. That is just a normal part of being a human, okay? And so what I find sometimes is people will sit there and say, oh, I didn't accomplish this last year, so I'm not even going to set a new goal for next year. Well, that's a defeatist purpose to begin with. And so you don't want to do that because that's going to start creating all these negative thoughts and other things that's going to make it less likely for you to actually accomplish what you want to this next year. So the first thing is just stop and have compassion for yourself and realize that you don't have to accomplish everything every single year. In fact, as humans, we tend to believe that we can accomplish much more than we can in any particular day. But here's the nice thing. Even though we can't accomplish everything that we think we can in one day, in 3 months and in a year, we can accomplish much more than we actually thought. Okay, so have some compassion for yourself. So one that relates to me, last year, I really, one of my bucket list goals is I want to run a marathon. I grew up being a runner in high school, was on the cross country team. I really enjoy running. But, as I've gotten older, it's been more difficult for me to do that. I haven't been in as good a shape to be able to run. And so I had set the goal that I wanted to run the Los Angeles Marathon in March of 2019. Now that didn't happen. And again, there's a whole bunch of reasons behind it. I got injured at the end of 2018. My knees were hurting. There were some other things that were going on, but I didn't meet that goal in 2019. Now, I could choose to beat myself up and say, oh, Jason, you're just an idiot. Why didn't you do that? You can never accomplish your goals. We don't want that kind of thoughts going through our mind. Instead, I stop back and I say, okay, well, you know what? I probably could have tried to do it, but it wouldn't have been smart. I would have hurt myself more. It was better for me to just have compassion for myself and say, you know what? 2019 wasn't the year for me for doing that. Now, March of 2020 is probably not going to be the time for me either, because we're getting very close to that. But at some point in my life, I'm going to run the Los Angeles Marathon. And so right now, again, I can put that out as kind of a longer term goal and think, hey, maybe March of 2021, maybe that's what I'm going to shoot for, because that would give me about 16 months from now when I could actually prepare and do what I needed to be ready for that. So have some compassion for yourself. The third one, break down those goals into 90-day increments or a quarter of the year. And the reason for this is sometimes we set these really big goals at the beginning of the year, and then we feel like we're never going to make it. So as an example, one of the most common things that people put on their list each year is I want to lose weight. Okay. So let's pretend that you have 40 pounds that you want to lose. So that's approximately, I think, about 18 kilos for those of you outside the US that you want to lose this next year. Instead of just thinking about that big goal of 40 pounds, break it down and say, you know what, in the first quarter, I want to lose 10 pounds. If I lose 10 pounds in the first quarter, in the second quarter, in the third quarter, and in the fourth quarter, by the end of the year, I will have accomplished my goal of 40, but I'm doing it in slow chunks of, 10 each quarter. So that's a way that you can kind of break down some of those big goals. If you break them down into smaller goals are easier to accomplish. But if you accomplish, in this instance, 4 small goals, you're going to meet your big goal. Okay. The fourth one, if we get into this one now, about developing some daily routines or habits for helping you to be able to reach those 90-day goals. So if we just carry this example forward a little bit, again, if I want to lose 10 pounds in the first quarter, there's probably some little things that I can do to help me reach that goal. So we'll just make up some things here, right? One of those might be, hey, I need to go for a run or for a walk, or I need to exercise 30 minutes a day. I may need to do something about my diet. Maybe I need to change, stop drinking soft drinks and sugary drinks, eat more vegetables. There's lots of different things that you could do. So if you break it down, what you're trying to do now is create new habits every day. And again, how do we do that? Well, we pick these little things, but for a habit to develop, you usually need to do it at least 30 times. So let's, again, take this as an example. And if you're a list checker, somebody who likes to check off lists, this is a perfect way for you to use a list. have a little list of, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you want to accomplish every single day, and then just make sure that you check them off every day. So if I'm trying to lose the 10 pounds and I decide I need to exercise for 30 minutes every day, I may actually create a little checklist that says, did I exercise for 30 minutes today? Yes, check it off. Now, I can't just do that for 1 week and then stop and expect that I'm going to have lost the weight. I have to develop the habit, which means that I need to do this for at least 30 days in a row. Okay. And so this is, again, as I talked about at the top of the podcast, this is one of the reasons why so few people actually keep their New Year's resolutions, because they do good for a week or two, but they don't do good for more than a month, which is going to help them in developing these new habits. And so again, if you're developing a new habit, think about those different habitual things that you can do every day that will help you get closer to your 90-day goal. If you're trying to break certain habits, then again, think about those pattern interrupts that you can do every day that will make it, harder for you to do that. So as an example, one of my friends that was trying to quit smoking, right? She would normally have her pack of cigarettes right by the back door. And so, she would see them, she'd grab them, go outside, smoke 2 or 3 or 4 cigarettes, and then come back in. Well, one of the ways that she tried to help herself and stop smoking was to interrupt that pattern. She moved where she kept her cigarettes, or she would only take 1 cigarette outside with her. She would be less likely to go back in and get more. And so as a result, she was able to slowly wean herself down and stop smoking. There's another example of kind of this pattern interrupt. Okay. Now, just to kind of, close up this, and again, the reminder that if you're having trouble meeting your goals, it's probably because you have not developed the habits that you need to have to help you in achieving those particular goals. Because our habits, those things we do, the behaviors that we have, that becomes who we are. Okay. And so if you want to change, if you want 2020 to be a better year than 2019 was, if you want 2020, if you want to accomplish certain things in 2020, you need to start looking at, how can I develop different habits? Now, some of those habits might mean, again, maybe you have to get up a little bit earlier in the morning to be able to accomplish what you'd like to before you go off to work. Well, that's just developing a new habit, okay? But once you've done it long enough, it becomes a habit, and then it's no big deal going forward. So again, I normally get up somewhere between 5 or 5:30 every morning. I've done that for years, so it's not difficult for me to get up at 5 or 5:30 in the morning, because I have developed the habit. Okay. So with that, let me kind of wrap up this episode. But really, I do hope and wish that 2020 will be an amazing year for you. It can be an amazing year for you. You just have to decide what you want to accomplish, right? And not just set goals, but start to create habits that will help you to get where you need to be. Now, also, as part of that, think about, who do you need to be? What do you need to do so that you can have what you want? And so again, you're going to hear me talk about that a lot, because so much of the time we think, when I have something, I'll do something, then I will become something. That's not how it works. You have to be a certain way. You have to do certain things, then you can have. And so this ties right back in with what we've been talking about today. You need to be the kind of person that sets habits, that is has integrity with yourself to make sure that you do those little things every day, that you're being the kind of person and doing the kind of things every single day that you need to help you develop these habits, then you will have what you want. And I know you can do it. I've done it. I've seen lots of other people do it. And so let's go out and make 2020 an amazing year. And with that, my friends, I will catch you on the next episode of Jammin' with Jason. Have a great rest of your week, and figure out, again, what habits do you need to create this next year to make 2020 the kind of year that you'd like it to be. And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Jamming with Jason. Keep on rocking in the audit world. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you later on the next show. If you'd like to earn continuing professional education for listening to today's episode, head on over to C-Risk Academy at ondemand.criskacademy.com. And that's C as in the letter C, riskacademy.com. Not only do you get a CPE certificate, but you also will have access to the video version of today's show. The views and opinions expressed on this show are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.